another level, makes it a little bit more appealing aesthetically. We'll get into a little bit of color here and there maybe, but ideally 6 we'll kind of keep away from, mainly because when people get into step 6, they get carried away and they overuse it, and basically it'll destroy all the steps you had done previously, and that's not what you want. This is supposed to support what you've done for your foundation. This is your foundation, this is the extra on top, which will make your drawings a little bit more interesting to look at. But stick to this. These steps are your most important. Keep this in your book at all times. And this applies to not only this style of drawing technique, but in all styles of painting or drawing. I mean, you start with simple forms. You find your form, the actual turning or the actual form itself. You got to understand how they turn in 3 dimensions, and then you've got to apply your surface detail, your textures, and then the shadows as well. So just stick to these 4. These will be really, really important for you, and also the hardest things to really master. They may seem simple, even when I'm doing it on paper, but again, like I said before, it's one of those things where you have to put in a lot of mileage, do it over and over and over again to really start to even get a grasp of what I've put up here. Going back, this applies to this as well, the 5 interrelationship shapes. Simple forms, which are these, your construction lines, which are the draw-through process. Applying your textures, you can apply textures to this if you like as well. The texture sheet you've already created from week 2, bring it in. Apply some of the textures into these forms. Your shadows, apply as well. Only do so once you've built up, I guess, like a catalog of shapes that you can go back to. I want you to be more comfortable with, going into the first couple steps. Don't rush. Definitely don't rush. Let's continue on. Let's get rid of this stuff here. There's one more aspect I wanted to kind of get into, and it's going to be an extension from what it was from last week. And actually applies to this as well. I already showed you a little bit, but we'll take it a little further. And it's going to be about the actual line quality itself. You have multiple pens with you. You got a 0.1, 0.3, 0.5, and a 0.7. 0.3 is your medium, your basic pen that you use all the time to draw with. Your 5 is what you thicken up your lines with. 7 is what you fill it in with your darks. 1 is your details. We're going to stick to 3 and 5. 3 is what you're going to build these shapes with. 5 is what you're going to use to create more interesting line qualities. So line variations, and this is what I'm going to get into a little bit. I just mentioned it last week in terms of cross-hatching. Here I mentioned it in terms of differentiating the line work where they meet. That's what you're going to use a 5 with. But let's take it a little further. Especially in terms of the cross-hatching too. This will be your first section of your homework. Your second half is going to be about line quality. And line quality is going to be important because if you don't use it just right, one, it'll either flatten the drawing or overpower it with heavy lines. And when you go one way or the other, it's just not going to work. So you got to find a balance and incorporate as much as you can on both scales. Let's see. Let's actually draw something here. Go back to the squid. kind of going back to the formula, this first step was simple forms, construction shapes, finding my contours, texture and shadows we'll kind of skip because I kind of want to get into more of the line aspect of this. Now, if I was drawing this on paper, I would be using the 3. Just finding my forms and shapes, getting into some of the details. But now you want to start to create some line variation. This is dynamic sketching. It should be interesting. It should not be, it shouldn't look like a cutout. Vary your lines, almost like brush strokes. You can have thin, thick, and thick to thin. So the more things that are closer to you, things are in the foreground, obviously will have a thicker line. As they go back and you vignette, it gets thinner. And especially where forms actually turn as well. So when you have, let's say, an egg shape, you have one single line, but as it comes around, you get thicker and thinner. So the idea of the opposites that we had talked about, thick to thin, dark to light, gradations, going thick, thin, line variations. And even the idea of focal points that I had talked about, areas of interest, that's where you keep a lot of your heavy lines. Things in the background that fade back, vignette, you create less detail and less line variation, basically. So really pay attention to that at first. I mean, when you start drawing, even with your 5 shapes, start to pay attention to your line quality. And that's also where the exercise that we had done with the line, with the 8 times over, building up your confidence, that will translate into this because you're not going to draw with like a ballpoint or a pencil. You're not going to try to find, I've shown you this many times already, you're not looking for your forms. You're hitting it once. Thick to thin. Now, after you've practiced a bit, played with line variation, let's get into a bit of the cross-hatching here. You've seen me apply some of it to some of the forms and shapes, but I haven't really described what I'm doing or what kind of cross-hatching really applies or where it applies. When it came to the shadows, when I was talking about it, what I kind of stick with is when you have your form shadows, my cross-hatching tends to be a bit more random. Other than where I'm doing cast shadows, my line's a bit more uniform. Uniform. And unidirectional, different directions. And this is what I use for form shadows or even describing textures and stuff like that. And let's apply it here. So again, going in multiple directions. Using cross-hatching to find your forms. So your second part of your homework, cross-hatching, line variations. Take some of your organic forms you had done, or even the geometric forms. You could even apply it on top of your 5-form interrelationships and cross-hatch. Do the straight unilateral, different directional cross-hatching. This one's going to be a bit tricky. It's going to take a lot of practice to really understand how to apply it and make it really work for you. Even on here. Cross-hatching, line quality. Another step that's really important, not crucial. I mean, this is your crucial stuff over here, your formula. But these are the small little things you're going to have to start to pay attention to really bring to life your sketches and drawings. This is kind of where it makes the difference between someone who's a really good sketch artist and someone who's just kind of just sketching for fun. Again, the details are going to be important to pay attention to. So again, stick to your 3.3 pen micron. Only go to 0.5 to thicken up some of your lines for variation. For cross-hatching, stick to your 3. Only go a little thicker if you want to have basically a darker form shadow, or if you want to describe some of the background a bit more. But again, do not use the 1s for this. If you're trying to cross-hatch with the 1, it's going to take you forever, because the amount of space you got to fill up in your cross-hatching, you're going to sit there for a long time. And this is for you to help build speed as well. So you got to learn to constantly move forward. Let's say you started one and you've completed a form and you start to crosshatch. Don't be afraid to mess up, or the idea that even if it's a simplistic form as an ellipse or a sphere, if you mess up, redo the same thing you've done. Even if it's this particular form and shape here, you've constructed it, and if you mess up at a certain point, on the same page, right next to it, below it, redraw it. Because when you've drawn something once, it's hard because you don't know what that form is like. So you're trying to figure it out, problem solve. Once you figured it out and you want to redraw it, when you redraw it, you already understand what's happening, so it's easier to do. So that's what I'm saying, whether it be the squid that I drew or a really random form and shape, you mess up, redraw it, crosshatch. I mean, mess up a lot of times, but you got to retry it over and over and over again. So that's really the only way you're going to learn, is redrawing some of the drawings you've already done that you've messed up on, repeating yourself so that you build up confidence in knowing those forms and shapes to understand and problem solve the things that you've messed up on. Learn from them. Learn from your mistakes, obviously. This week, 3 pages of the 5 forms in a relationship, learning how to stack them on top of each other, interlocking them like Legos I had mentioned before, and also 3 pages of taking either these forms or your organic shapes, geometric shapes, and applying crosshatching, unilateral or even different directional crosshatching. Play with these, definitely. Reference it, look at different artists as well. Crosshatching, is used by, many, many different kind of artists. And the amount of crosshatching out there, the kind of style that is used is really varied. So reference from other artists as well. Look through some of your books that you have, other artists, and just reference from them in terms of just the line quality and the drawing. So 6 pages total. Remember and read over this formula over and over again. Memorize it as best you can. This will apply a little bit more later on as well, especially in the advanced classes as well. 6 pages total. I can't wait to see what you guys do, and good luck with that.